Yellowstone, 2014. A canvas of raw, untamed beauty, where jagged peaks pierce an impossibly blue sky and ancient geysers breathe steam into the crisp mountain air. It is a place of wonder, a testament to the Earth's wild heart. And yet, it can also be a realm of chilling disappearances, where the vastness itself becomes an accomplice. 10 years ago, a young couple, filled with the boundless optimism of youth, ventured into this majestic wilderness. They sought adventure, solace, and perhaps a deeper connection amidst nature's grandeur. What they found instead was an oblivion so profound it would haunt investigators and loved ones for a decade, weaving a tapestry of unanswered questions and lingering sorrow. Their names were Ethan and Chloe, two souls embarking on what they believed would be an unforgettable escape, a fleeting moment of freedom before the demands of adulthood fully claimed them. Ethan, with his adventurous spirit and a knack for navigating the wildest trails, had meticulously planned their route, confident in his abilities to conquer whatever challenges the park presented. Chloe, a budding artist, saw in Yellowstone an endless source of inspiration, her sketchbook perpetually at the ready, eager to capture the subtle dance of light and shadow on ancient rock faces, the vibrant hues of wildflowers, and the untamed power of its wildlife. They drove into the park in a vintage, sun-faded Jeep, its back laden with camping gear, provisions, and a youthful idealism that seemed as boundless as the landscapes stretching before them. Their last known contact was a brief, cheerful text message sent to Chloe's sister, a simple confirmation of their arrival and a promise to call upon their return. That call never came. The silence that followed was not immediate, not a sudden, jarring void. Rather, it was a slow, creeping dread, a subtle tightening in the chests of those who loved them. Days bled into a week, then another. The initial concern morphed into alarm, and soon, a full-scale search operation was launched, painting the serene wilderness with an urgent, desperate hue. Park rangers, seasoned trackers, and an army of volunteers scoured the vast expanse, their voices echoing through canyons, their eyes scanning every crevice and dense thicket. Helicopters sliced through the sky, their rotors a rhythmic thrum against the backdrop of nature's indifference, their powerful beams cutting through the deepening twilight. Every potential lead, every faint trace, was pursued with a relentless determination, yet the wilderness yielded nothing. No discarded campfire remains, no footprints on a muddy trail, no tattered piece of clothing snagged on a thorny bush. It was as if Ethan and Chloe had simply dissolved into the very air they breathed, swallowed whole by the seemingly benevolent landscape. The Jeep, their only tangible link to civilization, was found parked precisely where they had indicated, neat and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in the hearts of their families. Inside, everything was as it should be, save for the absence of the two young adventurers. Their personal effects remained undisturbed, a collection of CDs, a half-eaten bag of trail mix, maps carefully folded, a camera with an undeveloped roll of film. It was an unsettling tableau, suggesting a departure, not an abandonment, as if they had merely stepped away for a moment, never to return. The investigation that followed was exhaustive, yet ultimately fruitless. Every theory was explored, every possibility considered, from a rogue animal attack to an accidental fall, from abduction to a deliberate disappearance. But each hypothesis crumbled under the weight of insufficient evidence, leaving behind only the gnawing certainty that two vibrant lives had been extinguished within the park's formidable embrace. As the seasons turned, the search efforts dwindled, replaced by the grim reality that Ethan and Chloe were, for all intents and purposes, lost. Their faces, once beaming with life in countless photographs, became symbols of a haunting enigma. Their story a cautionary tale whispered around campfires, a somber reminder of Yellowstone's unforgiving power. Their families, clinging to the faintest sliver of hope, refused to give up, their grief a constant, heavy companion. 10 years later, the wounds had scabbed over but never truly healed. The memory of Ethan and Chloe remained a raw nerve, a testament to love's enduring pain. And then, a decade after their vanishing act, a lone hiker, deep within a seldom-traveled section of the park, stumbled upon something that would not only shatter the decade-long silence, but also twist the initial narrative into something far more sinister than anyone could have ever imagined. The discovery was not dramatic, not a flash of light or a sudden revelation, but rather a subtle anomaly against the verdant canvas of the forest floor, a glint of unnatural color amongst the fallen leaves and ancient moss. It was a single, rusted piece of metal, barely visible, half buried in the rich earth. A small, unassuming fragment, yet its presence in such a remote location, far from any established trail or campsite, immediately piqued the hiker's curiosity. What could this be? What story did this forgotten piece of debris hold? The hiker, a seasoned outdoorsman named Samuel, possessed an innate respect for the wilderness and an acute awareness of its subtle language. He knew that the forest rarely yielded its secrets without reason. He knelt, carefully brushing away the accumulated detritus of a decade, his fingers tracing the outline of the object. It was an antenna, undeniably man-made and distinctly out of place. More disturbing still, it appeared to be an antenna from a very old, very specific model of a handheld amateur radio. The kind used by enthusiasts, by those who ventured far beyond the reach of cellular signals, those who sought connection where none officially existed. A shiver, not of cold but of unease, traced its way down Samuel's spine. He had heard the stories, of course, the whispers of the missing couple, the enduring mystery that hung heavy over this ancient land. Could this be related? His heart hammered a slow, insistent rhythm against his ribs. He knew better than to disturb a potential scene, to tamper with what might be crucial evidence. With a profound sense of gravity, he carefully marked the location using his GPS, took several photographs, and then, with a heavy heart and a mind racing with unsettling possibilities, made his way back to civilization, the weight of his discovery pressing down upon him like the very mountains themselves. The park authorities, initially skeptical, quickly dispatched a team of seasoned investigators to the coordinates Samuel provided. As they approached the site, the air grew heavy, thick with the unspoken anticipation of what they might find. The antenna, still protruding from the earth like a forlorn sentinel, was indeed a relic of a bygone era, its oxidized surface telling a silent tale of exposure and abandonment. But it was what lay beneath, just inches below the surface, that sent a collective gasp through the seasoned team. Gently, meticulously, they began to excavate the soil around the antenna, their movements precise, almost reverent. And then, the earth began to yield its grim secrets. First, a section of what appeared to be a makeshift burial site, skillfully concealed, almost undetectable to the untrained eye. Then, human remains. Not one, but two. Skeletal, intertwined, a chilling tableau frozen in time. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. After a decade of silence, of endless speculation, of a haunting emptiness, Ethan and Chloe had finally been found. But the manner of their discovery, the careful concealment, the remote location, immediately shattered the comforting, albeit tragic, narrative of an accidental death. This was no mere mishap. This was something far darker, far more deliberate. The initial hope that had flickered to life with Samuel's discovery quickly morphed into a profound sense of dread. This was not closure in the way anyone had hoped. This was the opening of a terrifying new chapter, one that promised to peel back layers of deceit and expose a truth more horrifying than the vast, indifferent wilderness itself. As forensic teams meticulously worked to exhume the remains, every detail was noted, every piece of surrounding evidence painstakingly collected. The earth, once the silent accomplice in their disappearance, was now being coerced into revealing its dark secrets. The analysis of the skeletal remains, while challenging due to the passage of time and the elements, confirmed the identities, Ethan and Chloe. But the preliminary findings also revealed something profoundly disturbing, details that definitively ruled out any natural cause of death. This was not a story of misadventure or a tragic encounter with a wild animal. This was murder, and the very fabric of the decade-old mystery began to unravel, revealing a sinister design that had been meticulously hidden from the world for far too long. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Eris Thorne, a woman whose career had been spent deciphering the silent narratives of the dead, approached the remains with a blend of scientific detachment and a profound respect for the lives they once held. Her initial assessment, conducted under the sterile glow of the lab, confirmed the brutal reality. Both Ethan and Chloe had suffered fatal injuries, not from a fall or an animal attack, but from deliberate, violent acts. The precision of the trauma, the distinct patterns of fractures, pointed towards an assault, a calculated application of force. This was not a struggle for survival against nature. It was a struggle against a human aggressor. The placement of the remains, the way they were intertwined, suggested a hasty but thorough burial, designed to evade detection. The remote location, miles from any established trail or human activity, spoke volumes about the perpetrator's knowledge of the park's forgotten corners, its hidden nooks and crannies. This wasn't a random act of violence by a passerby. This hinted at premeditation, a careful selection of a burial site, a deliberate attempt to erase their existence from the face of the earth. As the investigation intensified, a crucial piece of evidence emerged during the meticulous processing of the burial site. Tucked within the undisturbed soil, just beneath Chloe's skeletal hand, was a small, ornate silver pendant. It was tarnished, almost black with age and exposure, but its intricate design was still discernible. It depicted a stylized arrowhead, encircled by a delicate vine pattern. This was not a piece of common jewelry. It was unique, almost certainly handmade, a distinctive personal item, and Chloe's family immediately recognized it. It was a gift Ethan had given her shortly before their trip, a sentimental token of their shared love for the outdoors, a symbol of their adventurous spirit. Its presence here, at the burial site, was not only confirmation of her identity, but also a chilling detail. It suggested that she had worn it during her final moments, a silent witness to the horror that had unfolded. But the pendant also held a secret, one that would only be revealed under closer examination. A faint, almost imperceptible engraving on its reverse side, a series of initials intertwined with a date. Ethan's and Chloe's initials, and the date of their disappearance. It was a heartbreaking detail, a poignant reminder of their last day, forever etched into metal. The investigators, now certain they were dealing with a double homicide, began to re-examine every aspect of the original missing persons case, viewing the decade-old reports through this new, terrifying lens. Every statement, every interview, every discarded theory was pulled from the archives, scrutinized for any overlooked detail, any subtle inconsistency that might now take on new significance. The original assumption had been a tragic accident, a powerful testament to Yellowstone's unforgiving nature. Now, that assumption lay shattered, replaced by the grim reality of human malevolence. The park, once seen as a dangerous but ultimately neutral force, now harbored the chilling possibility of a predator, a calculating killer who had managed to evade justice for 10 long years. The discovery of the bodies, while providing a macabre form of closure, had undeniably opened a Pandora's box of questions. Who would want to harm Ethan and Chloe? Why? And how had they managed to disappear so completely, so utterly, for so long? The wilderness, once merely a backdrop to their adventure, now held the terrifying weight of a crime scene, its silence no longer serene but menacing, a complicit witness to a decade-old horror. The investigation pivoted, shifting from a search and rescue operation to a full-blown homicide inquiry. The stakes were higher, the implications more profound. The ghost of Ethan and Chloe, once a mournful echo in the vast canyons, now demanded justice. Their silence remained speaking volumes about the violence that had claimed their lives. The case, once filed away as an unsolved mystery, was now a live investigation, pulsating with a renewed urgency, a desperate race against time to bring a long-evaded killer to account. The desolate beauty of Yellowstone, once their sanctuary, had become their tomb, and now, perhaps, it would become the stage for their vengeance. The discovery of Ethan and Chloe's remains, along with the telltale signs of homicide, sent shockwaves not only through the tight-knit community of park rangers and investigators, but also through the nation. The story, once a distant, unresolved tragedy, was suddenly thrust back into the public consciousness, dominating headlines and rekindling a decade-old fear. The initial wave of renewed grief for the families was quickly overtaken by a burning desire for answers, for justice. The quiet sorrow that had settled upon them for 10 years transformed into a fierce, unwavering resolve. They had endured the agonizing uncertainty, the gnawing absence, and now they were prepared to face the brutal truth, no matter how horrifying. The investigative team, now led by seasoned homicide detective Sarah Jenkins, a woman known for her relentless pursuit of justice and her uncanny ability to connect disparate dots, embarked on an arduous journey through the labyrinthine details of the decade-old case. Every piece of information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was meticulously re-evaluated. The original witness statements, the atmospheric conditions on the day of their disappearance, the park's crime statistics from that period, everything was fair game. One of the first crucial steps was to revisit the Jeep. Though it had been thoroughly processed 10 years prior, the new context of homicide demanded a fresh, even more rigorous examination. Forensic technicians, armed with advanced tools and a sharpened focus, meticulously combed through every inch of the vehicle. What they sought was not what was missing, but what might have been overlooked. A stray fiber, a latent print, a microscopic speck of foreign material. Anything that could offer a clue, a lead, a whisper of the killer's identity. And then a breakthrough. Tucked away in a seldom-checked crevice beneath the passenger seat, almost indistinguishable from the accumulated dust and grime of a decade, was a single, small, but distinct item. It was a military-grade compass, not the standard recreational type, but a robust, specialized instrument, the kind used by trained professionals in rugged terrain. Its casing was made of a durable, dark green polymer, and etched into its back, almost invisible to the naked eye, were 3 small, intricate initials. JTM. The discovery of the compass was a seismic event in the investigation. It was a tangible link, a foreign object in Ethan and Chloe's vehicle, and it immediately pointed away from a random encounter. The very nature of the compass, its specialized design, suggested a perpetrator with specific skills, perhaps military or survivalist training, someone who was intimately familiar with navigating off-grid. The initials, JTM, became the primary focus of the renewed inquiry. Who was JTM? And how did their compass end up in Ethan and Chloe's Jeep? The team launched an extensive database search, cross-referencing military records, park visitor logs, and even local amateur radio enthusiast registers, given the discovery of the antenna at the burial site. The theory that began to emerge was deeply unsettling, a calculated, targeted act, rather than a spontaneous crime of opportunity. The careful concealment of the bodies, the remote burial site, the specialized compass, all pointed toward a killer who knew the wilderness, who planned meticulously, and who possessed the means and capability to execute such a heinous crime without leaving an obvious trace. The realization began to dawn on Detective Jenkins and her team that the initial search for Ethan and Chloe had been profoundly misled. The wilderness had not claimed them by accident. It had been weaponized by a human hand. The vast, beautiful landscape, once a source of comfort and adventure, was now revealed as a silent accomplice to a meticulously planned act of violence. The investigation expanded beyond the park's boundaries, reaching out to neighboring towns and communities, digging into any unsolved cases or peculiar disappearances from a decade ago that might now connect to JTM. The chilling possibility arose that Ethan and Chloe might not have been the killer's only victims, that a predator might have been operating unseen and unknown within the shadow of Yellowstone's grandeur. The stakes were incredibly high. Not only were they seeking justice for Ethan and Chloe, but they were also potentially preventing future tragedies, unmasking a killer who had walked free for 10 long years. The image of the young couple, their faces radiating hope and love in their last known photographs, fueled the team's determination, transforming the cold, clinical pursuit of evidence into a deeply personal quest for truth. The wilderness had held its breath for a decade, guarding its terrible secret. But now, with the discovery of the compass and the unraveling of the initial narrative, Yellowstone was finally beginning to yield its dark truths, one chilling detail at a time. The trail, once cold and seemingly impassable, was now burning hot, leading investigators down a path far more dangerous and twisted than they could have ever imagined. The compass, with its engraved initials JTM, became the singular focal point of the investigation. It was a tangible thread, pulling the entire unraveling narrative towards a specific, elusive individual. Detective Jenkins, a methodical and relentless investigator, knew that the key to unlocking the decade-old mystery lay in identifying the owner of that compass. The sheer precision of the initials, almost surgically etched into the metal, suggested a deep personal attachment, a tool carefully guarded by its owner. The search for JTM began with a thorough sweep of military personnel who had served in the regions surrounding Yellowstone National Park 10 years prior. The specialized nature of the compass strongly suggested a military background, perhaps a survivalist or reconnaissance expert. The team sifted through countless records, cross-referencing names, service dates, and any disciplinary actions or unusual incidents that might have aligned with the timeline of Ethan and Chloe's disappearance. The initial deluge of data was overwhelming, a sea of names and faces, yet nothing immediately jumped out. The killer, it seemed, had been meticulously careful, leaving few, if any, official breadcrumbs. But Detective Jenkins was undeterred. She knew that even the most cunning criminals often leave behind an Achilles heel, a single, critical flaw in their otherwise perfect design. The search expanded to include individuals with extensive outdoor or survivalist training, even those who might have worked as independent contractors or guides in the region. The theory was evolving. This was not a random act of violence, but a calculated, deliberate ambush by someone with a profound knowledge of the wilderness and a chilling disregard for human life. And then a name surfaced, not from a military database, but from an obscure, decade-old local police report. A man named Jasper Thomas Miller. JTM, the report was for a minor infraction, trespassing on private land adjacent to Yellowstone National Park, about 2 months after Ethan and Chloe had vanished. Miller, a recluse with a history of distrusting authority and a penchant for living off the grid, had been found constructing an elaborate, camouflage shelter deep within the wilderness, far from any established trails. He was a veteran, having served in a specialized reconnaissance unit, with an impeccable service record, but also a noted proficiency in survival skills and stealth tactics. The report described him as fiercely independent, almost paranoid, and possessing an unsettling calmness. He had been released with a warning, the incident deemed minor at the time. But now, in the chilling context of Ethan and Chloe's murders, that report took on a terrifying new significance. Jasper Thomas Miller, a highly skilled survivalist who knew the wilderness intimately, who possessed the very type of specialized equipment found at the crime scene, and who had been in the vicinity of Yellowstone National Park around the time of the murders. The puzzle pieces, once scattered and seemingly unrelated, began to click into place, forming a disturbing picture. The remote burial site, the careful concealment, the sophisticated antenna, all pointed to someone with Miller's specific skill set and mindset. He was a ghost in the wilderness, capable of moving through the dense forest without leaving a trace, of blending seamlessly into the vast, indifferent landscape. The motive, however, remained elusive. Why Ethan and Chloe? Had they stumbled upon Miller's hidden encampment? Had they witnessed something they shouldn't have? Or was it a more perverse, random act of violence, a dark manifestation of a disturbed mind operating within the perceived anonymity of the wilderness? Detective Jenkins understood the gravity of their findings. Confronting Jasper Thomas Miller would require extreme caution. This was not an ordinary suspect. This was a highly trained individual, someone who had likely lived off the grid for years, refining his survival skills and potentially his capacity for violence. They would need a strategy, an element of surprise, and a team prepared for the worst. The renewed investigation also uncovered a series of unsettling local rumors about Miller, whispers of him being fiercely territorial, of aggressively warding off anyone who ventured too close to his hidden sanctuaries. He was known to carry a variety of unconventional weapons, and his disdain for modern society was no secret. He saw the wilderness not just as a home, but as a fortress, a sanctuary from what he perceived as the encroaching corruption of civilization. The narrative was becoming clearer, darker. Ethan and Chloe, two innocent young adventurers, had likely stumbled into Miller's self-made domain, an isolated world where his rules and his alone governed. Their youthful exuberance, their presence in his secluded territory, had been perceived as an invasion, a threat to his carefully constructed solitude. The realization was chilling. The vast, beautiful wilderness of Yellowstone, a symbol of freedom and natural wonder, had also provided the perfect cover for a killer, a place where a man could disappear and make others disappear without a trace for a decade. The hunt for Jasper Thomas Miller was no longer just an investigation. It was a race against time, a perilous journey into the heart of a wilderness where a predator had reigned supreme for far too long. The ghost of Ethan and Chloe, once just a whisper in the wind, now cried out for justice, their silent plea echoing through the ancient forests, demanding that their killer finally be brought to light. The weight of Jasper Thomas Miller's identity hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension amongst the investigative team. Detective Jenkins knew they were dealing with a highly dangerous individual, a man who had not only murdered two young people, but had also meticulously concealed his crime for a decade, living an existence largely outside the purview of society. Apprehending him would require a level of tactical precision and strategic planning that few cases ever demanded. Miller was a phantom, known to move through the wilderness with an almost supernatural stealth, his movements tracked only by whispers and fleeting glimpses. The thought of confronting him in his own element, the vast and unforgiving landscape of Yellowstone, sent a shiver of apprehension through even the most seasoned officers. Yet, the imperative was clear. Justice for Ethan and Chloe demanded that Miller be found and brought to account. A specialized tactical unit, composed of park rangers with extensive wilderness training and elite FBI agents, was assembled. Their mission was clear: locate and apprehend Jasper Thomas Miller. The planning was meticulous, drawing on satellite imagery, old ranger patrol maps, and even the anecdotal knowledge of local hunters who had occasionally encountered Miller's camouflage traps or subtle territorial markings. They studied Miller's known habits, his preferred routes, his potential hideouts. They anticipated his evasive maneuvers, his ability to disappear into the dense foliage or melt into the shadows of ancient rock formations. The operation was launched under the cloak of pre-dawn darkness, a fleet of unmarked vehicles converging on the remote perimeter of Miller's suspected territory. The air was frigid, still holding the biting chill of the mountain night. As the sun began to paint the eastern sky with hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, the team fanned out, moving with a disciplined silence, their movements as fluid as the mist that still clung to the valleys. The search was a slow, painstaking crawl through dense forest, across rocky scree fields, and along the treacherous banks of rushing rivers. Every rustle in the leaves, every snapping twig, was met with an instant, hyper-alert response. Miller was expected to be armed and to resist. He had likely spent years honing his ability to detect intruders, to sense the slightest disruption in the natural rhythm of his isolated world. Hours bled into a day, then into a second. The wilderness, once a benevolent backdrop, now felt like a living entity, an antagonist working in concert with Miller, concealing his movements, echoing his silence. The team discovered several small, camouflage caches filled with survival gear, dried provisions, and a collection of handmade tools and weapons. crude knives fashioned from bone, meticulously sharpened arrowheads, and even a primitive but effective snare system. These discoveries painted a picture of a man utterly self-sufficient, a master of his environment, and deeply entrenched in his chosen way of life. It was late on the second day when a drone, deployed to survey a particularly dense ravine, captured a fleeting thermal signature. A flicker of heat, moving through a thicket of ancient pines, almost imperceptible against the vast, cold landscape. It was Miller. The tactical unit moved swiftly, quietly, converging on the location, their hearts pounding in their chests. The confrontation was not explosive, not a Hollywood-style shootout. It was eerily quiet, a testament to Miller's stealth and the unit's disciplined approach. They found him at a hidden spring, crouched by the water's edge, seemingly at peace with the world, a well-worn hunting rifle resting casually by his side. He appeared gaunt, his face weathered by years of exposure, his eyes holding a depth of solitude that was both unsettling and profoundly sad. He offered no resistance, no struggle. When confronted, he simply raised his hands, a chilling calm etched onto his face. He seemed almost resigned, as if he had been expecting this moment for a decade. He looked at Detective Jenkins with an unnerving intensity, a gaze that seemed to pierce through her, an unblinking stare that held no remorse, no fear, only a profound, almost detached acceptance. In his backpack, among his sparse belongings, they found another compass, identical to the one in Ethan and Chloe's Jeep, also engraved with JTM, and, chillingly, a small, intricate silver pendant, almost identical to the one found with Chloe's remains, but this one completely untarnished, polished to a brilliant sheen, hanging from a simple leather cord around his neck. It depicted the same stylized arrowhead, encircled by a delicate vine pattern. Its presence was a silent, damning confession. He made no immediate statements, only a curt nod when asked if he understood his rights. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with a decade of unanswered questions, of unspoken horrors. As he was led away, the wilderness seemed to sigh, as if a great, ancient burden had finally been lifted. The apprehension of Jasper Thomas Miller was a triumph of relentless investigation and unwavering dedication. But it was also the beginning of a new, even more disturbing chapter. Now, the full story of Ethan and Chloe's last moments, the motive behind their brutal murders, would finally begin to unfold. The true horror of what happened in Yellowstone 10 years ago was about to be laid bare, revealing a darkness far more profound than the vast, untamed beauty of the national park could ever suggest. The silence of the wilderness had finally been broken, replaced by the chilling truth. The true final act began not in the wild, but within the sterile, claustrophobic confines of an interrogation room. Detective Jenkins sat opposite Jasper Thomas Miller. The only sounds the low hum of the ventilation and the slow, rhythmic tapping of her pen. Miller remained silent for hours, his gaze fixed on some unseen point on the wall, a man seemingly disconnected from the physical world. It was a battle of wills, a test of patience that Jenkins was prepared to win. She presented him with the evidence, one piece at a time. The photographs of the burial site, the amateur radio antenna, the military-grade compass, and finally, the two pendants, the one found with Chloe and the one he wore around his neck. It was the pendants that finally broke the silence. He looked down at the tarnished silver on the table, a flicker of something, perhaps a distant memory, crossing his placid face. He began to speak, his voice a low, gravelly monotone, a narrative so devoid of emotion it was more terrifying than any confession fueled by rage. He spoke not of anger, but of a profound and inviolable need for solitude. His story was a chilling testament to a man who had chosen to live a life of complete self-sufficiency, of absolute isolation from a world he had come to despise. He had, as the investigators suspected, established a hidden encampment deep in a secluded, rarely visited section of the park. It was his sanctuary, his fortress, a place where he was the sole ruler. He saw the wilderness not as a shared public space, but as his private domain, his refuge from the noise and chaos of civilization. And then, he said they came. He saw their jeep on a distant trail, an intrusion, a foreign object in his world. He watched them from afar, observing their movements with the predatory patience of a wolf. They were young, filled with a careless joy he could not comprehend. He saw their tent, their campfire, a small, bright blemish on the perfect canvas of his solitude. He waited, and then, one day, they ventured too close, unknowingly straying from the main trail and stumbling into a clearing that led to his hidden camp. They saw a flash of his shelter, an unthinking, innocent moment of discovery, a slight surprise, a brief flicker of curiosity on their faces. It was at that moment, he explained with chilling clarity, that the decision was made. He did not feel anger. He did not feel remorse. He felt only the cold, logical necessity of protecting his solitude. He needed to erase the intrusion, to ensure that the sanctity of his world remained unbroken. He lured them closer with a fabricated story, a feigned camaraderie, a calm demeanor that betrayed none of the darkness beneath. When they were close enough, he acted with a swift, brutal efficiency honed by years of training. The attack was not prolonged, not a struggle. It was a cold, calculated execution. He buried them meticulously, using all of his skills to make their grave undetectable, a final act of erasure. The antenna, he admitted, was a deliberate act of misdirection, left as a false clue to mislead any potential searchers, a small, cunning detail designed to point them away from the truth. The pendants, he confessed, were a twisted sort of trophy. He had taken Chloe's from her and had crafted a replica for himself, a constant reminder of his dominion over his chosen territory, a chilling memento of the perfect crime. His confession was a tapestry of chilling logic, a narrative of a man who saw other human beings not as individuals with lives and dreams, but as variables in an equation he needed to solve to maintain his chosen existence. He had not murdered out of hate, but out of a profound and frightening detachment. The motive, so long elusive, was finally revealed, and it was more terrifying than any simple act of rage or jealousy. It was the chilling horror of pure self-preservation, a perversion of a survivalist instinct taken to its darkest extreme. The trial that followed was a formality, the evidence irrefutable, the confession a stark, unblinking account of the truth. Jasper Thomas Miller was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. But for the families of Ethan and Chloe, there was no true closure. The answers they had sought for a decade were finally laid bare, but they came with a new and profound form of sorrow. The truth of their children's last moments was a brutal and haunting burden. The wilderness, once a symbol of their youthful dreams, was now a monument to a senseless, monstrous act. The story of Ethan and Chloe is not just a tale of a mystery solved, but a somber reflection on the darkness that can exist in the human heart, and how even in the most beautiful and untamed places, the greatest dangers are often not from the elements, but from the quiet, calculating malevolence that walks among us, unseen until it is too late. The silence of Yellowstone, once so peaceful, now holds the echo of a chilling truth, a somber reminder that some secrets are buried not by the earth, but by the darkness of a human soul.